coming out from the Indiana Fever management team, they have finally gave us a little insight as to how this roster is going to be constructed. Now, the Indy Star got hold to this information. It was released late last night. Now, we know the CBA has been signed, man, and there's a lot of different tangibles that was plugged in that could affect the construction of the roster. Now, we got players like Natasha Howard. Ain't nobody talking about. Like, what's going to happen to her? I don't believe that the Fever is possibly going to protect Natasha Howard.
Everyone believes the Indiana Fever have it all figured out and can simply run it back like nothing ever changed. But what if the numbers are quietly telling a completely different story? The moment you strip away the hype and actually look at the math, this feel-good narrative starts to unravel fast. Contracts are climbing, the salary cap isn't going anywhere, and suddenly loyalty comes with a heavy price tag. So now the real question becomes, is this team actually built to last? Because behind the scenes, the cracks may have already started to form.
Can't afford to run it back. They can't. They simply put, do not have the funds to, why does every time I go into roster, does it send up a freaking AI question? But they don't have the funds to put their team together. Again. So I'm going to guess what these players are going to cost. I'm going to tell you what it will cost for the Fever to run it back.
Let's start with the obvious centerpiece, Kelsey Mitchell. She's not about to take a discount out of goodwill, nostalgia, or a sudden urge to become a financial advisor's worst nightmare. She has leverage, she has production, and she understands exactly what that combination is worth. The expectation is straightforward. If she stays, she's going to be paid like someone who cannot be replaced, which means a contract right at the top of the market.
Goes for the Indiana Fever. And then also we have the Supermax Bonanza that I've been hearing in some of the discourse about that situation. And then also I want to finish off with a little bit of the CBA, how I feel about it. So small here, just so y'all can kind of look at the lineup. I'm not necessarily going to use this, just want y'all to see the names. So starting off, who stays, who goes?
Now here's where things start to get complicated. Once you commit to a big contract for Kelsey Mitchell, you're no longer simply building a team, you're managing a puzzle where every piece comes at a premium, and the margins for error get smaller by the day.
I highly doubt Kelsey Mitchell is going to play for 1 cent less than the Supermax. And I have a feeling she is going to be used, the core designation is going to be used on Kelsey Mitchell to guarantee she stays, and it will be a Supermax for Kelsey Mitchell because there's 1 more year of the core designation. So with that, we are looking at $1.4 million for Kelsey Mitchell's contract.
Then you look at Aaliyah Boston, and it's clear she's not stepping into the team-friendly deal category anytime soon. Dominant interior players don't usually wake up and decide to take less than they're worth. Her contract alone can push a roster into territory where front offices start feeling the pressure, forcing them to make tough decisions just to stay under the cap.
For the expansion draft, first person, Caitlin Clark, you have to protect her. Come on, man. First all WNBA team in her rookie year, in the MVP candidate race in her rookie year. Come on, dog. You absolutely keep Caitlin Clark. Kelsey Mitchell, have to protect her. Have to protect her. Whether you want her gone or whether you don't want her gone, I think I can speak for both sides that it makes sense to protect her. You don't want her to go for nothing, right? You can't allow a team to just grab her for nothing.
And just when it seems like there might be a little breathing room, you hit the reality of Caitlin Clark. The face of the franchise, the ratings magnet, and the player you can't afford to treat like anything less than a cornerstone. Right now, her deal may look manageable, but everyone understands what comes next, and it won't come at a discount. So suddenly you're looking at 3 cornerstone players who are either already expensive or on track to become extremely expensive, and that run it back idea starts to feel less like a plan and more like a luxury. And that's before you even get to the supporting cast, where things shift from complicated to borderline unrealistic. Take Natasha Howard, a player who knows her value and won't hesitate to seek a deal that reflects it. Somewhere out there, a front office will agree just long enough to make a costly commitment that tightens the cap even further. That leaves a team stuck in an uncomfortable middle ground. Either overpay to keep her or let her walk without a clear, affordable replacement waiting in the wings. Because replacing proven production with cheaper versions isn't a strategy, it's wishful thinking. Then there's Sophie Cunningham, who isn't locked into a system that forces her to accept a discount just for familiarity. She understands her value, and the market does too. If another team is willing to offer more, the decision becomes simple. and the pressure shifts entirely onto the front office to justify every dollar.
That we're definitely going to have to pay attention to as we get closer to that expansion draft. We're going to talk about her in a hot second, but we have to talk about this article that was released by the Indy Star last night, and we definitely need to get into this. So it's stating how the WNBA's new collective bargaining agreement affects the Indiana Fever roster, right? So it goes on to say the WNBA Players Union announced the two sides have signed to a term sheet for the new collective bargaining agreement, which we know that took place yesterday.
And right behind her is Lexi Hull, who may not command superstar money, but still sits in that tricky middle tier. Expensive enough to matter, yet affordable enough that losing her creates a hole that isn't easy to fill. At that point, the roster isn't just being managed, it's being balanced on a knife's edge. Stack those contracts together and you start pushing toward the cap limit at a pace that feels less like planning and more like playing with financial pressure that should come with a warning label. And this is where things shift from stressful to borderline absurd. Once the core is paid, you're left building out the rest of the roster with whatever resources remain, veteran minimums, rookie deals, and players who are either developing, overlooked, or still proving themselves. What once looked like a deep, balanced team suddenly turns into a top-heavy core surrounded by uncertainty. It doesn't stop there. Draft picks, the safety net every team leans on, start to lose their value in a situation like this. When you're that close to the cap, even rookie contracts can feel like a burden, which is a reality that shouldn't exist in a system designed to promote parity. So now the team is faced with a difficult trade-off. Keeping the stars they've built around may come at the cost of future flexibility and incoming talent. The very mechanism meant to help teams reload becomes something they may have to sacrifice just to stay financially stable.
Sports reporters, let's talk about this Indiana Fever salary situation, because now we've learned exactly what it is Caitlin Clark's going to be making. We got a pretty good idea of what Aaliyah Boston's going to be making. And then there is, what is Kelsey Mitchell going to be making? And I'm starting to see Indiana Fever fans literally going to war with each other. And I guess this is going to happen.
And that's where the real irony sets in. The very roster everyone wants to preserve could end up forcing the team to break itself apart. There's even a scenario, and it sounds extreme until you actually look at the numbers, where a difficult decision involving Kelsey Mitchell might be necessary just to maintain flexibility. Not because anyone wants to, not because it makes the most sense on the court, but because the financial structure leaves very little room to maneuver. If that happens, the entire run it back narrative doesn't just fall apart, it collapses in a way that exposes just how fragile the setup really is. Then you add another layer, long-term planning. Even if this group somehow fits together for one season, what comes after that? When Caitlin Clark reaches her next contract, when Aaliyah Boston continues to command top-tier value, when Mitchell expects to be paid like a star, everything tightens even further. The math doesn't improve, it gets tighter. You quickly reach a point where just a handful of players consume the vast majority of the cap, forcing the rest of the roster to be filled with minimum contracts and hopeful projections. And that brings you to scouting, which is where things can either stabilize a team or expose its weaknesses. If you're relying on undervalued talent, overlooked international players, or hidden gems, you have to be consistently good at identifying and developing them. Historically, teams that succeed in this space are the ones that dig deep into overseas markets and uncover players others miss, turning them into real contributors. But if that part of the equation isn't strong, you risk falling into a different pattern, relying on familiar names who may have once been productive but no longer move the needle in a meaningful way. And in a system this tight, that kind of mistake doesn't just cost you games, it costs you flexibility, depth, and long-term stability.
All right, the Indiana Fever face some very, very big decisions moving forward. Okay, with the new CBA, everything has changed. There's a lot at stake with every single move. One bad signing can alter your roster completely in terms of the supporting cast you are able to get around your stars like Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah.
So now the issue isn't just financial, it's strategic. If the only way to stay afloat is to consistently outscout everyone else, and you haven't built a system that reliably does that, then you're essentially betting your future on a strength you haven't proven yet. That's how you end up with a roster that looks strong at the top but gradually weakens the deeper you go. Which brings the conversation back to the idea everyone loved. Continuity. Continuity sounds ideal, until it becomes unaffordable. Chemistry sounds valuable, until it costs you depth. Loyalty sounds admirable, until it leads to decisions that strain the entire roster. The Indiana Fever aren't just dealing with a basketball challenge. They're facing a structural one, where the league's financial framework makes it difficult to keep too many high-value players together at once. And that's the reality fans don't always want to confront, because it feels uncomfortable, but it's unavoidable. You can't pay everyone. You can't keep everyone. And you certainly can't rely on everything working itself out on its own. At some point, something has to give, whether that's a key player moving on, a surprising trade, or a shift toward a top-heavy roster with all the risks that come with it. What they can't do is simply run it back, as if nothing has changed. Because everything has changed. The expectations are higher, the salaries are rising, and the margin for error is shrinking quickly. And if they ignore that reality, if they try to force a roster into a financial structure that doesn't support it, they're not just risking a season. They're risking the entire window.
Stephanie White, stay the hell out of the front office. Don't put your hands on, or you know, your mindset, your hands, your thoughts, anything on the roster changes. Okay. And you guys need to scout overseas. There's a lot of talent overseas. Many, with this new CBA, the salary cap and the pay scale, there are some players overseas that didn't come to play in the W that probably will.
So the next time someone casually suggests bringing everyone back, just remember this. It's not about whether it would be nice. It's about whether it's even possible. And right now, the answer is starting to look less like a confident yes and more like a very expensive no. And the most uncomfortable part of all of this is that the Indiana Fever aren't being punished for failure, they're being tested by success. They drafted a generational guard in Caitlin Clark, developed a dominant interior presence in Aaliyah Boston, and built around them with real scoring talent like Kelsey Mitchell. That's exactly the kind of core teams spend years trying to assemble. But instead of being rewarded with simple continuity, they're handed a financial puzzle that gets harder every time someone improves. The better this group becomes, the more expensive it gets to keep intact. It's a strange reality. Success doesn't just bring wins, it brings pressure. Attention turns into leverage, leverage turns into bigger contracts, and bigger contracts start clashing with long-term planning. From the outside, this trio looks like the blueprint for contention. On paper, it's everything you want. The real question is whether the structure around them can actually sustain it, or whether the very success they've built becomes the thing that eventually forces it apart.
Because I am seeing a narrative that people believe that Kelsey and Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin and Lexi and Sophie, that this team is going to be able to remain intact. And I don't know how, okay? Because when you look at the way the team is structured, in order for this team to remain intact, Sophie would have to be willing to take a league minimum kind.
But in reality, that trio can quietly force you into reshaping everything around them. Once those three, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell, start occupying the financial spotlight, everyone else becomes a question mark, not because of talent, but because of cost. And this is where the just find cheaper role players idea comes in, a solution that sounds perfect for about 5 seconds before it runs into reality. That magical market of underpaid, high-impact players doesn't exist. What actually exists is a league where every team is chasing the same undervalued talent, where agents know exactly how demand is rising, and where even solid role players can see their value jump after a strong season. So when you look at someone like Sophie Cunningham, the idea that she'll simply stay for less out of loyalty starts to feel less like strategy and more like wishful thinking. Even if she wants to stay, if she likes the system, the city, and the fit, all it takes is one better offer elsewhere to change the equation entirely. Then there's Lexi Hull, who represents another version of that same dilemma. She's valuable enough to matter, but not so indispensable that the team can justify overpaying without consequences. And that's exactly the kind of player who gets squeezed when budgets tighten. Not because she isn't worth it, but because the numbers force difficult decisions that don't always reflect the basketball reality.